The hill looked quiet, too quiet. On the morning of August 12, 1944, a thin layer of mist rested over the hedgerow fields of Normandy like a gray blanket pulled gently across the land. The air was still. The breeze barely moved the tall grass along the slope. Somewhere in the distance, birds could still be heard. To anyone passing by, it would have looked like the war was far away, but war was already there, waiting. Hidden just beyond the crest of that hill were 6 American Sherman tanks, engines silent, guns loaded, crews holding their breath. They had spent the entire night preparing a trap, and within minutes that quiet countryside would erupt into violence so sudden and precise that 5 of the most feared tanks in the German army would be destroyed before they even understood what had happened. By August 1944, the battle for Normandy had entered a new phase. The Allied breakout, after weeks of brutal fighting, had finally begun. American forces were pushing forward. German units were falling back, trying to reorganize, trying to slow the advance. But Normandy was not open terrain. It was a maze. Hedgerows formed natural walls across the countryside. Fields were separated by thick banks of earth and tangled vegetation. Visibility was limited. Movement was restricted. For armored units, this environment was both a danger and an opportunity. A tank could dominate open ground, but in Normandy, there was very little open ground. Every field could hide an ambush. Every road could become a trap. And on that August morning, one such trap had already been set. The American tanks positioned on the hill belonged to Company B of the 66th Armored Regiment, part of the United States 2nd Armored Division. Their commander, Captain Robert Landry, had chosen the ground carefully. The hill gave them elevation. The slope allowed them to position their tanks in hull-down positions, where only the turrets would be exposed when they moved forward. From below, they were almost invisible. Branches and vegetation had been placed over parts of the tanks to break their outline. Tracks had been hidden. Engines had been shut down. Everything had been done to ensure one thing: surprise, because the enemy they expected to face was dangerous. Very dangerous. German Panther tanks. The Panther was one of the most effective armored vehicles of the war. Its long 75mm gun fired at extremely high velocity. At long range, it could destroy a Sherman easily. Its frontal armor was thick and sharply angled, making it extremely difficult to penetrate. American crews had learned this the hard way. If you fired at the front of a Panther, there was a good chance your shot would fail. To destroy it, you needed to hit the sides, but that required letting the Panther come close enough to kill you. That was the risk, and that was the plan. Inside the lead Sherman, the atmosphere was tense. The air smelled of oil, grease, and heated metal. Captain Landry stood half out of the commander's hatch, binoculars in hand, scanning the road below. He had barely slept. None of them had. Driver Private First Class Eddie Morales sat forward at his controls, waiting. Gunner Sergeant Tom Wilkes stared through his telescopic sight. Loader Corporal James Fulton held an armor-piercing round ready beside the breech. Assistant Driver Harold Dugan listened carefully, straining to hear anything beyond the silence. No one spoke. They did not need to. Every man understood what was about to happen. Time passed slowly. Minutes stretched. The mist hung low across the fields. Then Landry heard it. A faint sound at first. A deep mechanical rumble drifting through the countryside. Engines. Heavy engines. He raised his binoculars. A thin cloud of dust appeared along the road. The enemy was coming. Several kilometers away, 5 German Panther tanks moved cautiously along a narrow road. They belonged to the 2nd SS Panzer Division, experienced crews, veterans of weeks of fighting in Normandy. At the front of the column stood Obersturmführer Karl Richter. He had survived battles around St. Lo and Carentan. He knew Normandy was dangerous. The hedgerows limited visibility. The narrow roads restricted movement. Allied aircraft threatened from above, but Richter trusted his tank. The Panther beneath him weighed nearly 45 tons. It carried one of the most powerful guns on the battlefield. If used correctly, it could destroy any Allied tank before the enemy even had a chance to respond. Still, he remained cautious. He scanned the terrain ahead. A low hill rose in the distance. Quiet, empty, nothing moved, everything looked normal. That was the problem. Back on the hill, the American crews watched as the first Panther appeared between the hedgerows. Then another, then more. 5 in total, moving slowly, unaware. Inside the Shermans, everything changed. The waiting was over, now it was about timing. Captain Landry spoke calmly over the radio, "Hold fire." The Panthers continued forward, 500 meters, 400. Sergeant Wilkes adjusted his aim. The lead Panther filled his sight, 300 meters, still too far. At this distance, the Panther's frontal armor might deflect the shot. 250, closer. The German tanks rolled steadily up the slope. 180 meters. Landry raised his hand. "Stand by." The Panthers kept coming. Now their side armor was exposed. This was the moment. Landry gave the signal, "Fire." The first Sherman fired. The quiet morning shattered instantly. The 75mm gun roared, sending a shockwave across the hill. Smoke burst from the barrel as the recoil slammed the gun backward inside the turret. The armor-piercing shell raced down the slope. It struck the lead Panther just behind the turret. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the steel split. The round punched through the side armor and detonated inside the fighting compartment. Flames erupted from the open hatch. The Panther shuddered and stopped. Before the Germans could react, the rest of the hill came alive. 5 more Shermans fired almost simultaneously. The mist filled with thunder. Shells streaked down toward the German column. The ambush had begun. The second Panther tried to rotate its turret toward the hill. Too slow. A Sherman shell slammed into its side armor. The impact punched through cleanly. Black smoke poured from the engine deck. Inside the tank, fire spread rapidly. The crew never had a chance. The third Panther reacted faster. Its driver pushed the engine hard, trying to turn the tank toward the hill. But another American shell struck its track. The heavy metal links shattered instantly. The Panther lurched sideways and ground to a halt. Now the German crews understood. They were trapped. Obersturmführer Richter reacted immediately. He shouted commands through his headset. "Reverse, turn the turret." His Panther began backing down the road as the turret struggled to swing toward the hill. The long 88mm gun aligned, then fired. The German shell screamed across the field and exploded near the American line. Dirt and rock blasted into the air. One Sherman rocked from the shockwave, but the American line held, and they kept firing. Another Sherman round struck the fourth Panther. The shell hit the turret side. The armor cracked under the impact. Flames burst from the hatch seconds later. The narrow road had become a killing ground. Burning tanks blocked movement. Smoke filled the air. Visibility collapsed. At the rear of the column, the fifth Panther tried to escape. Its driver threw the tank into reverse. The engine roared as it backed down the road, but one of the Shermans positioned on the flank had a clear angle. The gun fired. The shell struck the rear of the Panther. The engine compartment exploded. The tank rolled only a few meters before stopping completely. Now only Richter's Panther remained fully operational. Inside his turret, Richter could see the destruction around him. 4 Panthers burning, 1 disabled. The ambush had destroyed his unit in seconds, but his tank still had a gun. Through the smoke, he spotted the flash of a Sherman firing near the hill. He gave the order. Fire. The 88mm shell struck one of the Shermans directly. The impact tore through the turret. The American tank rocked violently. Smoke burst from the hatch. For a moment, the balance shifted. The Germans had struck back, but only for a moment. 2 Shermans adjusted their aim instantly. They fired almost together. One shell struck the turret side. The other hit the hull near the driver's position. Richter's Panther stopped. Smoke poured from the engine compartment. Then flames followed. The last Panther was finished. The battle ended as suddenly as it had begun. In less than 5 minutes, it was over. 5 German Panthers destroyed. 1 American Sherman lost. The hill fell quiet again, but it was not the same quiet. Now the air was filled with smoke, the smell of burning fuel, the crackle of fire. Captain Landry slowly rose higher from his hatch. He lifted his binoculars and looked down the slope. The road below had become a graveyard. Black smoke drifted across the fields. Flames flickered from the wrecked tanks. The hedgerow country had revealed its true nature once again. This was not open warfare. This was close, hidden, patient, and deadly. The ambush near that small Norman hill demonstrated something critical about armored warfare. Victory did not always belong to the tank with the thicker armor or the bigger gun. The German Panther was on paper superior to the Sherman, stronger armor, more powerful gun, better range. But none of that mattered in this fight, because the Americans had chosen the ground. They had controlled the moment, and they had used surprise. By forcing the Panthers to expose their side armor, they turned the battlefield in their favor. By waiting until the exact right distance, they ensured their shots would penetrate. And by firing together, they overwhelmed the enemy before it could react. It was not just firepower, it was timing, discipline, and coordination. The kind of coordination that turned 6 tanks into a single weapon. The German crews were experienced. They were cautious. They were not careless. But even experienced crews can be defeated if they are surprised in the wrong place at the wrong time. Normandy was full of such places, and that hill was one of them. That quiet hill looked harmless at sunrise, but within minutes, it became one of the deadliest places on the battlefield. 5 Panthers entered that road believing they controlled the fight. None of them left. So here's a question worth thinking about. If you had been inside that Sherman, waiting in silence, watching enemy tanks move closer and closer, would you have had the patience to hold your fire? Or would you have fired too early and given away your position? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want more cinematic World War II stories like this, make sure to subscribe.